بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Welcome to episode 56 of the series of the authentic statements of the companions. In this episode we'll take the story of how Umar radiyallahu anhu was killed, and this is a lengthier narration from Sahih al-Bukhari that we will take, but we're not going to go through all the details, mention all the details so as to avoid making it too long, because it's a very long narration. Inshallah, if you'd like, you could read the whole story with its details, but we're going to touch upon the main points. And so the narrator of this story says, talking about how Umar, when he'd lead the morning prayer, he said he'd come and then make sure that there's no gaps, no issues with any of the rows, and he'd say stawu, reminding people to straighten the rows, to fill in the gaps, making sure that the rows are, people are perfecting their rows before Salah. And then when he sees that there's no issues, that the rows have been straightened, he steps up and he starts the Salah. He opens up with a takbir, and sometimes he'd read Surah Yusuf or Nahl or something of that length, so that in the first rak'ah, so that people would gather, giving people time to, if someone's coming late or anything, to catch the first rak'ah. On that day, the day that he was killed, as we know, he was stabbed when he was leading Fajr Salah. So again, this is what the narration goes through. As soon as he did the takbir and started the prayer, except that as soon as he did that and people heard him say, the dog has killed me, when Abu Lu'lu al-Majusi stabbed him with a dagger. And that Abu Lu'lu, the guy who stabbed Umar, he stabbed him 3 times, as we know. He had a dagger with 2 edges. It's double-edged. It has a blade on both sides. A blade on 2 blades, one on each side. So it's a double-edged dagger. And he stabbed Umar 3 times and then ran out, not passing by anyone on his left or his right from the companions and the other Muslims praying behind Umar, except that he also stabbed them, until he stabbed 13 people. That day he stabbed 13 different people who were praying their Fajr with Umar radiyallahu anhu. And 7 of them passed away. 7 of them passed away or died from that incident. And as he was going through stabbing people left and right, one of the Muslims saw him, and so he threw a coat or a cloak or some clothes on him, some garment or covering on him, to cover him, basically, to catch him, to prevent him from stabbing more people. And so when Abu Lu'la knew that that's it, he's going to be captured, he killed himself. He stabbed himself with the dagger that he was using. And then Umar radiyallahu anhu, after he was stabbed, he took the hand of Abdurrahman ibn Auf and moved him forward to continue leading the Salah, leading the people in Fajr. And the people who were standing behind Umar saw what happened, or nearby, because of course at the time it was Fajr, it was dark, As for the people who are on the extremities of the masjid, who were far away from Umar, from who weren't in the front rows, who couldn't see, or on the sides, or in the back, couldn't see what's going on, all they knew is that they couldn't hear Umar's voice. They couldn't hear him reciting Quran, so they kept saying Subhanallah, Subhanallah. Then Abdurrahman bin Auf prayed a very light prayer. When Umar moved him forward to continue leading people in prayer, because he was stabbed, Abdurrahman prayed a very light prayer. And then after that, when they're done with their prayer, Umar asked Abdullah ibn Abbas anhuma, he said, look, see who killed me, who stabbed me. So he went and looked, he came back, he said, the servant of Al-Mughira. And he was, a skilled servant, and that's why, it's a lengthier story of why Umar made an exception for him to allow for Al-Mughira to allow his servant to stay in Medina because he was a skilled worker and you know knew how to do a lot of different things, carpentry and you know had different skills. And when Umar anhu knew that it was him who stabbed him, the servant of Al-Mughira, he said, قاتله Allah, I had commended good for him. I advised Al-Mughira to treat him well. And then he said, Alhamdulillah, the one who, Allah, who did not make my death upon the hands of a person who claims to be a Muslim, claims Islam. Again, you know, it's a long story, so we're gonna not go into all the details. Then Umar anhu was carried to his house, and people, it's as if they have never been inflicted with a calamity before. It's such a you know, test for them. It's such a calamity to have Umar anhu, Amir al-Mu'mineen, the Khalifa at the time, be stabbed while he's leading Salah and Fajr and be killed. And so he was carried to his home, and then he was given some different drinks to drink, and then you know as he drank them, they'd come out of his belly, out of his stomach, showing that you know it was a deep wound. Again, these were deep wounds, stabbed 3 times, you know, with a sharp dagger, deep wounds. Anything he drank wouldn't stay in it to come out through his wounds. فَعَلِمُوا أَنَّهُ مَيِّتٌ. So they knew that he is going to pass away. That's it. I mean, he's going to die from this. It's not something that a person could recover from. It's not a you know, shallow wound. It's a deep wound. So people entered upon him, and people started praising him, and a young man came to visit him, and you know, again giving him glad tidings. Say, "Abshir ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, you know, glad tidings from Allah for you. You know, you're the companion of the Prophet ﷺ, and you put forth and served the deen of Islam, and then you were put in charge as the wali, as you know, the Khalifa after Abu Bakr, and you were just, and then shahada, you know, the martyrdom, you know, being killed, you know, this shahada for the sake of Allah." So Umar said, I wish it was neither for me nor against me. Meaning, I wish I break even from it all. You know, it's not for me or against me. SubhanAllah, see how much of a trust that the companions saw, you know, being in charge of other people and leading others and being having authority over them. And then when the young man turned away and was walking away, Umar noticed that his lower garment was touching the floor. So Umar said, bring the young man back to me, call him back. And so he told him, Ya ibn akhi, my nephew, you know, again, term of endearment, you know, the you know, my son or you know, young man, irfa' thawbak, lift your garment, for indeed it is more likely to, subhanallah, I mean, Umar on his deathbed, he's dying on his deathbed, and that didn't stop him from advising people. And people, you know, look at something that people today say it's not a big deal, you know, it's not important. SubhanAllah, Umar on his deathbed, calling this young man back after he left, call him back to advise him, lift your lower garment, so it's not dragging, it's not touching the ground, because as we know, the sunnah is to have our garments mid-shin, and what's longer than that is fine as long as it's above the ankles. And there's severe warning for wearing it below the ankles or dragging it out of pride. But anyways, going back to this, subhanAllah, you know, he said, lift your lower garment, for indeed it's more likely to preserve your thawb, your clothes, not make it dirty and worn out. وَأَتْقَى لِرَبِّكَ, and more likely or has more taqwa for your Lord. And then Umar radiyallahu anh called his son Abdullah ibn Umar radiyallahu anhuma, and he said, look what I have, debt. And so they calculate, subhanAllah, I mean, a great ruler, a leader, on his deathbed, and he has debt. that he wanted to pay off before he passes away. You know, I mean, this is unheard of. We see so many of the rulers throughout history who go into ruling, and they leave after having accumulated a lot more wealth than what they have come into it with. Subhanallah, subhanallah. That's if they leave. That's if they don't stay in power until they die, and they have accumulated huge amounts of wealth. SubhanAllah, Umar radiyallahu anhu did not take a penny that wasn't rightfully his. And he had debt when he was dying, when he was killed, he's on his deathbed, he had debt. 86,000 to be more precise, as mentioned in that narration. And he said, pay it off from, his money, from his family's money, and then from Bani Adi, and then from Quraysh. If it wasn't enough, ask within Quraysh to be able to pay off his debt, and then don't ask anyone beyond them. And then, so pay off my debt. Umar is telling his son, pay off my debt. Then go to Aisha, the mother of the believers, anha, and tell her, Umar gives you a salam, and he said, don't say Amirul Mu'mineen, don't say the Prince of the Believers. For he didn't want to use his title to get what he wanted. So he said, don't say Amirul Mu'mineen. In other words, he's asking her as a request, as a favor, and he's not commanding her as Amirul Mu'mineen. And say, Umar asked you for permission to be buried with his two companions, meaning the Prophet ﷺ and Abu Bakr were buried in her house. And so Umar went and gave the salam and asked for permission, and went in and saw Aisha anha sitting down and crying. And so he told her, Umar says salam, and he asked for permission to be buried with his companions. So she said, I had wanted it for myself. She wanted it for herself to be buried next to her husband sallallahu alaihi wasallam and to her father radiyallahu anhu. But she said, I will give it up. Even if it's, I wanted it more for myself, I will give it up today, from, even though I wanted it myself. And so when he came back, when Umar came back, Umar said, help me sit up. And he said, what do you have? What's her answer? And so he said, what you wanted to hear, what you like to hear. Amir al-Mu'mineen, she gave permission. So he said, Alhamdulillah, there's nothing more important to me than this. So he said, so if I pass away, once I die, subhanallah, such a amazing companion. We see why the first generation of Muslims and why Islam was so honored and lifted and subhanallah, had such a status in the world when it was carried by giants like Umar radiyallahu anhu and like the rest of the companions radiyallahu anhum. What an example were they for us. So he said, when I pass away, carry me, and then go back, give salam, and say Umar bin Khattab ask for permission. If she gives permission, then take me in and bury me there. And if she doesn't give permission, then take me back to the graveyards of the Muslims. Again, showing that he wanted to ask again in case she felt any pressure, because he's Amir al-Mu'mineen in his lifetime, and he's asking for permission. In case she felt any pressure to say yes, he said after he passes away, take him and then ask for permission again. And if she refuses, then take him back to the general graveyard of the Muslims. But if she gives permission, then bury him next to the Prophet ﷺ and Abu Bakr anhu. And then Hafsa came, and the daughter of Umar anha, al-Mu'mineen, and she entered, and she was crying, and again, long story. But then people asked, they said, give us your wasiyah, awsiya Amir al-Mu'mineen. Oh, Amir al-Mu'mineen, istakhlif, appoint someone after to be the Khalifa after you. So he said, I don't see anyone who has more right to it, to the Khilafah after him, then those people whom the Prophet ﷺ passed away, and he was pleased with them. And he listed 6. So there's 10 companions who are given glad tidings of Jannah, the Ashar al-Mubashirin. Well, we know there's others, but those 10 that were mentioned as the 10 who were given glad tidings of Jannah, as we know, Umar was one of them, Abu Bakr was another one, so those 2. And one of them was Abu Ubaidah, who had already passed away, and one was Sa'id bin Zayd, who was Umar's cousin, but Umar didn't want to include him in being considered for the Khilafah, because again, he's his cousin. He didn't want it to any of his family members to have anything to do with it, so that people don't say, oh look, he's appointing his relatives, etc., etc. So Umar named 6. The other 6, aside from those 4, the other 6 who were giving glad tidings of Jannah, as he mentioned, those whom he knows the Prophet ﷺ passed away, and he was pleased with them. So he named Ali, Uthman, Zubair, Talha, Sa'd, and Abdul Rahman bin Auf. May Allah be pleased with them and all the companions. So them 6, he said, and Abdullah bin Umar, his son, will witness that, but he won't take any part of it, meaning he can't be appointed as the Khalifa. And then he mentioned, if Sa'd was appointed as the Khalifa, then that's that. But if not, then whoever is appointed as Khalifa, let him use him, meaning use him as a governor, as a ruler somewhere to oversee or govern over certain areas. Use him. He said, فَإِنِّي لَمْ أَعْزِلُهُ عَنْ عَجْزٍ وَلَا خِيَانَةٍ. I did not take him out. He had appointed him, but he was appointed as a governor over certain areas, but then Umar removed him from that. He said, I didn't remove him because of ajj, because of lack of ability to lead. He's lack of leadership, or not being able, or weakness, not being able to fulfill that trust, and not out of treachery, or not accusing him or thinking that he was of treason, or thinking that he's not loyal or trustworthy. So he had other reasons why he removed him, which we won't get into here. But the point is, he said these are the 6, and then he said whoever comes after me. He started giving advice for the Khalifa after him, with the Muhajirin, the early Muhajirin, the Ansar, other people. He listed different groups of the Muslims, and then when he passed away, again, they took him and they went. So Allah and Umar gave salam, and he asked for permission. Aisha gave permission, and so he was buried with his 2 companions, the Prophet ﷺ and Abu Bakr anhuma. And then when they're done burying him, those 6 people with Abdullah bin Umar anhuma, those 7 people gathered together, and again, it's a lengthier story, not to make this video long, but that's how Uthman anhu was given bay'ah, was given the pledge, was appointed Khalifa after Umar and the rest of the companions, including Ali gave him the pledge, and the rest of the Muslims and the companions. May Allah be pleased with them all. Barakallahu feekum, jazakumullah khaira, wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.